Hello and welcome to the Leaders Council podcast, the podcast for the people who run the country and the people who keep the country running. My name is Scott Challoner, and once again, I'll be exploring a new perspective on leadership, joined each week by a different CEO, CFO, director, president or government minister, and one day perhaps even the transport secretary, once he has undergone his mandatory 2-week quarantine, of course. The aim in these interviews is to discover who these people are, the people who get up each morning and make this country work. We discuss everything from how you build a business up from scratch and then adapt, right through to securing a lucrative contract, and of course the innovation and success that makes it all worthwhile in the end. We also get their take on the current economic and political landscape here in the UK. We will be hearing from former Education Secretary and current Leaders Council Chairman Lord Blunkett a little later on in the show. But first and foremost, I am delighted to be joined by Michael Charalambous, founder of Tradeforce Gas and Heating, one of London's most efficient emergency gas and heating services. Established in 2006 and initially working as a sole trader, Tradeforce has seen significant profitability and growth and now employs 10 people after securing a lucrative gas engineering contract with estate agents Kinley, Folkard and Hayward. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Mike Charalambous onto the programme. Good morning, Mike. Very warm welcome to you, and thank you ever so much for taking the time to join us on the programme today.
It's my pleasure. I've always got time for you.
It's wonderful having you with us once again, Mike. And we're here, of course, to talk about leadership and really bring that into focus on the programme today. But since this generation of business leaders, both politically and in business, is facing, I think it's fair to say, one of the greatest challenges of our time at the moment, it would be remiss of me not to ask just how the COVID-19 situation has affected you and your business operations.
Yeah, well, obviously a lot of people, it stands still with a lot of the companies are closed down. A lot of my clients are sort of like, well, they've closed their business. So the work stream is much, much lower. So what I had to do, obviously, the government had helped enormously by furloughing my staff, which has helped enormously because otherwise I would have definitely folded. The next thing that I have got a bounce back loan, which I needed to make my general costs run and my business still sort of like float in these hard times. I have spoken to my staff throughout and tried to contact my clients all throughout this COVID. Morale is generally low, but I am trying to boost them up by staying positive, sending text messages, sending emails and all positive stuff to say that we will get through this. And, I am there for all my staff and my clients, which I have been. We have been running a very skeleton service because we are a gas and heating firm. And obviously people's boilers still break and still leaks around. But obviously in this case, we have made sure our PPE is really, really important to us. So we've got onto that first and foremost. But yeah, on general terms, as I said, we are we're very dynamic as a company to try and introduce these PPE, these new measures. That's going to be ever changing in this ever changing world because of this circumstance.
I think it is going to be an ever-changing world as a result of COVID-19. Sure. You're absolutely right there. And do you think some features of the lockdown period in particularly that sort of transition to home working in a lot of cases, could well become a permanent fixture of the way that business operates in the UK?
Well, 100%. What I'm finding, to be honest with you, is changing. It's such a drastic effect of like the way we're working, all the measures taken out. So what I'm trying to do is just adapt quickly as possible to the ever-changing climate. I really feel that's really, so you've got to be aware with communication to your staff, to your clients, obviously get as much press coverage as possible to see what new measures are being taken by the government, and you've got to try and adapt the business to it. So that's really important, I think, at this time.
And what do you think the long-term effect of the pandemic will be specifically on your industry?
Right. I think it will start from the top, as you say. The building sector normally goes first, so I'll have to be on that. And what will happen if the building sector from the top starts declining. Obviously, more engineers go out on the road and do my sort of work, and hence there's less work for each individual company, which I get. What we have to do, a lot more plumbers are going for the same job, it seems, at the moment. So we'll have to adjust our price maybe accordingly. The other thing is just make sure we're getting our customer service is top notch as always, to make sure that we've got the best chance and of dealing this little sort of like interruption of service, like the work out there. And that's what we could say. Yeah, we just got to keep doing what we're doing, keeping our service to the maximum we can do.
And when it comes to sort of mentally preparing yourself to deal with a significant challenge or a crisis, and I'm not just talking in terms of COVID here, I'm talking like in the everyday context of running a business like Tradeforce. When you sort of have to, when you know that something is coming on the horizon, how do you mentally prepare yourself to deal with it?
Well, that's a tough question because, as you say, you ain't got no one to. I've got a partner who's great, who supports me, and I've had a newborn son who you've got to be able to switch off in certain stances. So you obviously you've got to work hard. That's a given to be a success. But you also have to switch off and mentally switch off from work and enjoy your personal life because as much as possible, because you only live once, and it's getting a fine balance in doing that, I feel. So switching off is really, really important for your well-being and for your staff as well, because obviously whatever you do, your staff will do. So that's quite important. I leave that to my staff.
How easy do you find it to switch off yourself from the hectic world of running a business?
Well, it took a bit of time, I'll be honest with you, because I bet every business owner is sitting at home thinking about the same thing. When you go to sleep at night, it's on your mind, staying up. And I'm sure a lot of business owners have gone through that, as I have. But it's difficult. There is people you could talk to, or you could go to sports activities. I know in this climate, as you say, gyms have just opened, and that's been quite difficult as well. But going for walks, obviously I've got a brand new son, so I like go to walk with him and my missus. Just you've got to find that time to just do that sports activity, to do activities with your family, with close people, and that helps you switch off incredibly.
I think what this pandemic has certainly done is it's thrust back into the limelight, hasn't it, the importance of mental health and well-being in business and in leadership, both in terms of safeguarding your own and also that of those around you, hasn't it?
Yeah, and it is, I'll be honest with you, it does feel lonely at the top. There's never a truer saying, and it does, because you've got to make it happen yourself, all in that circumstance of helping yourself, helping your because if you're going to be miserable, your family's going to be miserable. It leads when you're a leader. That's what happens. It leads down. It trickles down to the bottom. So you've got to look after yourself. You're the most important person to look after in business. So that's really important. I don't stress enough for that.
It's a hugely important point, that, Mike, isn't it? That it is a lonely place at the top, because
100%. It is very lonely at the top. And my missus always says, "I'm here for you." And sometimes I would go into myself, and she knows. Well, she gets upset because I'm upset. But you've got to find a way, because it's so important to find that time and the energy. Because sometimes you do feel like your energy lowers. So you've got to find the energy and just go for the walk with whoever close to you, your loved ones. So that's really important.
And of course, it's a natural reaction in a time of difficulty for anybody to look up to their business leaders, managers and executives for inspiration and direction when they need it. But for you being at the top of the tree where there is nobody above you to refer to, it makes it all the more lonely, doesn't it? So would you say that your inspiration therefore comes from your family?
Well, it does. It comes from my family and the people below you, because you've being a leader, you've got to stand out and be candid. That's how I feel. And it gives me the strength, because people are relying on you and your actions. It gives you the strength to actually carry on. To say that we will be positive, positive thinking. I have read a few books as well, which I can tell you over if you like. I can give you some books that I've read. So that was they've been really helpful. Like building. I read the book called Building for Your Future by Greg Wilkes, and that was really helpful. Just positive. It was just a positive thing to do. But all these positive books, they're quite good. I found that helpful. But if you've got to find your own niche to be positive and to lead by example to your staff.
I think that's very right. And just considering that it's come under an enormous amount of debate during the pandemic period as well. And we've spoken already about the measures that the government have brought in, small business loans, of course, the furlough scheme as well, that's helped so many businesses. But there's just been a great deal of discussion surrounding that about the clarity of certain safety procedures and guidelines. How have you felt from that point of view, Mike? Have you been satisfied that you've known business-wise exactly what's been expected of you?
Sometimes it's been a bit clouded, I'll be honest with you, I feel. But what my solution to that? We want to go to. Our steps have been. Well, how can I explain to you? Have been the utmost protection as possible from day one, because we knew it was. I found out it was a big bad, so we made sure our PPE was always spot on from day one. We always had our masks, we always had our gloves going in, and we sprayed down disinfectant after we were working. And that was from day one. We felt that, and it's still happening now. And we're still going to do that until we know the virus is completely gone.
And of course, it's been a very difficult and a very sensitive time for many this last few months. But would you say that there are any positives that you can take from this difficult time? Maybe that it's galvanised you as a business? Well,
yeah, there is positives, because the human spirit, it still lives on. That's a really good positive to have. And we're still here. The company is still here fighting and fighting for our clients as well. So, we're here for our clients. That's a positive thing. And we've adapted how we've adapted workings now for our clients to make sure they are all safe. That's the number one priority. So that's definitely a positive in that case. It just proves that once you get through stuff, it's no true saying, what don't break you makes you stronger. So that's what's happened really as well. So yeah, we motor on.
I suppose it's been a significant learning curve for businesses and business executives, hasn't it, this period, having this experience of crisis management, as it were. And I think that word learning is incredibly important, because even when we are running our own businesses, we're in leadership positions. I don't think we are ever a finished article, are we? It's still constantly a process of developing and learning even then.
Yeah, I agree 100%. That's the first thing you learn when you start getting successful, that you're always adapting, because things are changing ever so, especially in this climate, ever so quickly. So you've got to change with it, and you're always adapting yourself and learning yourself. You are the biggest investment in your company. You are, because you make all the decisions. You make your ethos as a company. You create all this. So you've got to be able to adapt quickly and dynamically in this climate.
And we've mentioned, of course, the L word, leader, a lot over the course of the last sort of 10, 15 minutes. But if we just sort of take that aside for a moment and consider that in just a little bit more depth, how would you define the role of a leader? What is a leader and what ought they be?
Well, I don't believe in dictatorship myself. I don't there's a way to do things to deal with people. I think you've got to lead by example. And I like to have the leader of a family institution where everyone's like, all my engineers are like my friends, not too friendly. There's a line, you do keep, because, you can go over the line. It was a really important line. But I like to have a leader. So I've got to be the best dressed, the most on time, the most presentable. You've got to do that, I think, and then your staff will follow suit. Your best customer service. What you do to give us customer service that you go at? Because I'll show them myself as an engineer, because I am an ex-engineer. I'm not a businessman really. I've been brought up as an engineer, so I'll show them the way, and they follow suit. It's a natural thing that they automatically follow your ethos, how you present yourself, and so on.
And going back several years now, Mike, to your past, as you sort of briefly mentioned there, you completed your training at British Gas before launching your own business in 2006. You combined your training in other areas then to make for a diverse offering, and it's grown into quite the success since then. But what was the moment when you knew that going into business for yourself and going down that self-employed route was the way forward?
It's when it's a feeling inside that you feel automatically you feel self-accomplished. it's a strange thing because your clients start calling you all the time and tell you how good you're doing. I want to give me more work, and and then obviously you feel self-accomplished, and once you feel that self-accomplishment, you feel much more confident, and then the rest sort of follows after that. The confidence that it brings is really helpful. It's all about confidence. You've got to gain that confidence from somehow, but I gained it luckily from my clients, and because they couldn't get enough of my work and my work ethos, so that was quite important.
And of course, going from being a sole trader for a while to working with a group of people, having secured that lucrative gas engineering contract with Kinley, Folkert and Hayward, of course, how was it sort of adjusting to then working with a team?
It was difficult initially, I ain't going to lie. I did have a lot of unfortunate incidents and made a few mistakes, which you have to learn from. I learned from them really quickly, though, because they were expensive mistakes. But don't get down about it. Just pick yourself up, brush yourself off, and stand up again and carry on. That's all I could say, because no one's perfect in business. I certainly wasn't. I made a lot of costly errors, but it puts you in a position of, as we spoke about earlier, dynamicity of you learning all the time. That's really important.
I suppose, in a way, I mean, we can't really hope to develop into effective leaders in our roles without having that experience of getting things wrong and then embracing the learning curve.
Yeah, sure, exactly.
And this might seem a little bit of a mean question to follow on, Mike, but based upon all of the years of experience that you do have now, if you could go back to 2006 when you first started the business, is there anything that you would do differently, or would you just embrace that journey you've been on?
I think you have to. Well, I embrace it now because at the time I didn't. I would try to learn to switch off better and not work so difficult, so vigorously. But at the time, it suited me because I was a single man. I didn't have a young family at the time, so it suited me to work the 24 hours, get stressed, and it suited me at the time. So I wouldn't change anything. But looking back, I wish I handled it better, and my time management was better back at the time. It was quite vigorous and quite, I weren't very organised within myself, which I would change straight away. So that's quite important. A little tip for everyone that's young and wants to get into leadership is your time management is so important.
So what other advice would you actually give to somebody looking to maybe start out in business, maybe among the younger generation?
My advice would be don't give up. Always look positively throughout. Just your energy is so important. You are your business, and whatever your ethos and personality is, your business will run off, and that's how your clients will see you. That's really important. So just don't give up. Keep going, even if you get knockbacks. I'll be honest with you, it's for some people, and it's for not others. I do understand that. There's some leaders and some people that don't want to lead. But if you are one of those people, don't give up because it will come eventually. It does. As long as you keep learning, keep learning from your mistakes, because you will make mistakes. That's really important.
I suppose it's important for those aspiring to be leaders to recognise as well that it comes in many different forms, doesn't it? A leader isn't always having to be somebody who sticks their head above the parapet, as it were. It can be someone who kind of just goes about their business quietly and just leads internally.
Yeah, because I used to have a business partner, but when we were like in one company together, and he was different in his way of leading, but he was used to say I should do that. It's sort of like it was implied to me. You should dictate to them what to do, but it's not. You've got to bring out the best in people, and it's a very difficult thing to do. It's like looking at that human being. Some people need to be pushed up the backside. Some people need their arm around them. It's very difficult, but you get that through experience of just dealing with more and more of your staff. You've got to go through the motion. If you're not skilled at it already, some people are naturally gifted. You say, I can look at someone, he needs an arm around him or whatever, or you need a good kick up the backside. But you'll learn that sort of process as you grow yourself.
Exactly. We've already talked about learning, and it is a process of learning on the job, gathering that experience, and using that to sort of just mould and adapt your own leadership style in a way.
Sure.
thinking of the future, Mike, just before we do sort of wrap things up on the programme today, it has, of course, been a few months since Tradeforce featured in the Parliamentary Review. And you mentioned in the article that you put together for that guide to best practice that prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, you were eyeing up in terms of future plans to increase your local reputation by investing in rebranding the business, sort of sprucing up the business website and just seeking to increase the awareness of the firm as a whole. Has that been put on hold by the situation as it is, or is that still on the agenda?
It's still on the agenda. It's still what I have done in this lockdown, to be honest with you. I've had a lot of time building that up, the sort of like the background of it. So I've had a lot of time doing that. And I've actually what I've created now is I've got Tradeforce Gas and Heating, but I'm going to go to more of the energy sector, obviously the renewables and stuff like that, because it's going to be a massive, I think in 10 years' time, it's going to be a really big industry. So we're going to Tradeforce Gas and Heating, which is going to support sort of like all local people to try and get more energy efficient in their workings of heating, because all these new controls are coming in. So I've done a lot of courses whilst on lockdown, as I say, ever learning. And we're going to try and hit that. As I say, that's going to the new. I have got 2 more apprentices starting as well, hopefully in September. So that's another good thing. And one of them is going to be going into the energy sector as well. So I've done a lot of training myself. And we are, obviously, being a dynamic company, we are doing that.
Sounds like some incredibly exciting plans on the horizon. So over the next sort of 12 to 18 months, as we're grappling with the challenges of this new normal way of working and living that we are going to have to get used to until we emerge from COVID, what is it that you're ultimately hoping to achieve, Mike?
Well, as I said, what we're trying to do is we were trying to get more youngsters through our training scheme, because I think building them from the start, as I say, they work alongside my ethos and my company's ethos. They're ready made, basically. Once we do that, go through our training program, that's really important, and that will automatically give you the clientele base extension that we want to get out to. We're going to try and get to, as you say, more local and tell about energy efficient stuff as well. That's what we want to try and hit towards. This energy efficient is really important about saving the planet and saving money for yourselves as well.
Of course, there's a huge emphasis on a green recovery as we move out of the COVID pandemic as well, and let's hope there's some positive news to share on that front, Mike. We are just about out of time on the programme today, but I have to say it's been a real pleasure and also really insightful actually having you join us, Mike, to discuss your take on leadership and what the business is also getting on with behind the scenes as well. And
it's my pleasure.
And considering as well that there are still a great many variables in the way that the pandemic could go, I actually think it would be wonderful to catch up in the next few months and have you back on the programme, and hopefully there'll be some positive news to share, not just in terms of where we are as a society and as an economy, but also in the business as well, and how you're branching out into the energy sector. Yeah,
that'd be great. No problem. I'd love to.
It would be fantastic, Mike. I really enjoyed having you join us today, and most importantly, Mike, do take care and do stay safe in the meantime with all still going on.
And yourself, and love to everyone out there. Thank you.
I reiterate that message to everybody out there as well. Do please be careful, look after yourselves and others, because it does make a tangible difference in keeping people safe and saving lives. I was speaking on today's programme to Michael Charalambous, founder of Tradeforce Gas and Heating. I hope you all enjoyed the interview and, of course, learning more about how the whole Tradeforce team is continuing to raise standards even throughout this challenging time. Next up on the programme, I'll be handing over to Matthew O'Neill for his exclusive interview with former Education Secretary and Leaders' Council Chairman Lord Blunkett. Lord Blunkett is today an active member of the House of Lords, as well as being a prominent former Labour MP and Secretary of State. In fact, during his political career, he rose to prominence to become one of the most renowned politicians of his generation, holding various senior positions in Tony Blair's cabinet and serving as the MP for his Sheffield, Brightside and Hillsborough constituency for 28 years, all despite being blind from birth. It was August 2015 when he was elevated to the House of Lords as Baron Blunkett of Brightside and Hillsborough, and I hope that you all enjoy listening just as much as Matthew relished the opportunity to speak with him. That is, of course, coming up next.
Lord Blunkett, welcome.
Thank you very much. It's very good to be with you.
Well, of course, nothing is being said at the moment other than COVID-19, which we must touch on. What would your message be to small businesses who are trying to keep going?
Well, I think the last ones standing will be the ones that thrive when we get back to some sort of normality. So it's have confidence and courage. Obviously, take advantage as far as you can of the government help. I think that Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor, has gone about as far as you could have expected in the circumstances. There are obviously small businesses that fall between the cracks. Those who don't have defined premises can't benefit from the business rate waiver, have not really been able to demonstrate that they can adhere to the PAYE for furloughing staff, and of course whether they can receive the grant, 10,000 or 25,000. All of those who can are obviously able at least to benefit from that for the time being and look to the future. But I think the second thing to say, and they don't need me to tell them this as a politician who did once do a business studies qualification, which is that it will be a different world, and being able to think about how that world will look in a year's time and be creative about it and learn from not just what's happening to you at this moment in time, but to others around you and the sector that you're working in, that will be really important.
Do you feel that the long-term effects of the COVID-19 outbreak will in some ways be positive for British industry?
Well, only in the sense that people are having to be creative, they're having to adjust and innovate. Therefore, they're thinking about more productive, if you like, greater productivity ways of delivering the same service or delivering the same products. And in that sense, I think we'll have temporarily at least very much higher unemployment than we've become used to, but we'll probably have a burst of productivity, which will help with the recovery. Whether it will help with the inequity of the way in which our economy is imbalanced, both between services and productivity and production of goods and services, I'm not sure. What we will need to try and do is to ensure that the geographic imbalance that exists is, as far as humanly possible, is dealt with by both the entrepreneurship and innovation from the bottom up and targeted government help, which will still be needed. And we are now in the throes of the kind of borrowing that we saw back in 2008 to save the banking and economic system. We're having to do that to save the whole of our productive business and commerce, and I think that will have to be sustained for some time.
Do you feel that people will take a second look at global supply chains in the wake of this outbreak?
I think there's going to be much more creative ways of using local supply and linking up inside sectors much more effectively. And I hope that the Leaders' Council will be able to play a part in that, in the sense that people who have something in common, a synergy in terms of what they're delivering, whether it's a service or whether it's manufacturing or whatever, will be able to see that there's a good outcome from knowing the sector better, linking with people, not just geographically, locally, but those in this country who may not have been on the radar in terms of what they produced for the supply chain. And of course, ensuring, because there's quite a lot of fraud going on as we speak with people getting into cyber attacks, that they'll also take account of going into the cybersecurity side effectively as well. The more we are online, the more people who are working from home, the more vulnerable those businesses and their supply chain become. And that's something to think about as well.
How important is strong leadership at the moment?
Well, I actually think that it's brought to the fore leadership in a whole range of areas, from obviously government itself, and there's been ups and downs with the Prime Minister's severe illness, but all the way through the public and private sector, people have, to use the jargon, stepped up, and they've shown local, regional, national level the kind of leadership that Britain historically was very good at. Regrettably, we've not seen the same on the international scene for all kinds of reasons, but maybe we will in future. So I think out of this will come experience of people who have seen an opportunity to do good, as well as seen an opportunity to provide a good a service or goods, including, for instance, shortages for the health and social care system, the food chain and the like. But also, I think in terms of seeing the synergy between the private and the voluntary sector and using people's commitment to each other in a very positive way. I'm not sentimental about this. Things will revert. Mm-hmm. But actually, I think there's a kind of moment of moral judgment of people feeling that they've got a role to play outside the immediate survival that they're engaged in. And if we can hang on to a little bit of that social responsibility, that will be a very positive outcome.
Absolutely. Now, what's your broad view of how the government is responding to this? Are you broadly supportive of their measures?
Well, it may surprise people to hear that I have been very supportive. Of course, there's been legitimate criticisms about the speed of response on protective equipment and on issues relating to testing. But my own view is very similar to the challenge that was made to the Prime Minister of Italy when people said, why didn't you close Italy down faster? And he said, a fortnight before we did it, I would have been considered to be a madman and nobody would have agreed to do it if I'd tried to move too quickly. And I think that's something that we need to reflect on here in the UK. We may have seen the signals elsewhere across the world and taken them more seriously at the time. Hindsight is a wonderful thing, but as someone who's had his life in the opposite political party to the present government, I think that with some hiccups and mistakes, they've not done a bad job in what has been incredibly difficult circumstances.
And you're absolutely right. In a liberal democracy that we live in, it's very difficult for people to swallow orders given to them from government.
Well, the UK and the US, and to some extent the Scandinavian countries, have a very different history and therefore interest in maintaining the freedom to decide and the persuasion and consent that's required. Those countries that have experienced one way or another totalitarianism over the last century have a slightly different way of coming at this. Mm-hmm. I don't want to exaggerate it, but I think that that's why getting the balance right of getting people to go along with what you want them to do in their interests as well as the nation as a whole is a sensible, proportional balance. And I think we now need to adjust to the coming out of the crisis gradually, readjusting to recovery in the same way.
Now, something you've mentioned recently on this balance is the police overreach in the enforcement of the COVID-19 structures that have been put in place. What have they done right, and where have they gone too far?
Well, I think that they were interpreting what was not necessarily as clear advice as it might have been for all kinds of reasons, because people were feeling their way. I think what's come out of it has been a demonstration by local police services in some parts of the country that they could get people to do what was needed without the heavy hand of drones overhead or people being told that they shouldn't be walking in the street, because this was all about self-isolation, not incarceration. It was about getting people not to pass the infection on to each other and therefore to provide distance rather than to make our lives a misery. Those police services that adopted that policing by consent and chivying people along did really well. Those who went over the top, I think, soon got a very substantial pushback. And one of the strengths of our democracy is that you could have that debate. People could say, I'm terribly sorry, we think the police force in our area has gone over the top. And that in itself is a constraint and a readjustment. That's another strength of living in a country where you can have opinions and express them without actually being thought to be a fool.
Now, of course, the government has faced criticism that they were slow to react, and Boris Johnson wasn't present at the early COVID-19 COBRA meetings. Now, Number 10 has claimed that this is normal practice. The health secretary often chairs Cobra meetings related to health. Does this tally with your experience as a Secretary of State, or would you have expected the PM to be more hands-on during the initial stages?
I think different prime ministers do have a very different style. And Boris's style, which I think will now be considerably adjusted, was very swashbuckling. In some senses, delegating is a good thing, as every leader of every business or public service knows. Those who try to pull too much into themselves end up with a massive bottleneck, great failure of trust, and the inability of people to show what they're worth and to demonstrate their capability. So I'd be very wary of jumping in and saying he was wrong to delegate the essential Cobra meetings. What I was surprised about was that he didn't chair the first couple, because my experience with Tony Blair for the 8 years I was in cabinet was that Tony was a great delegator, but he would get a grip to begin with, watch what the difficulties were, and then give people direction and confidence to be able to get on with it. So looking back, I think Boris himself probably thinks, God, I wish I'd spotted the signals from elsewhere in the world more rapidly, and I'd just been there. However, this also raises another issue. All of us in positions of leadership need good teams around us. I think after this is over, he will be assessing those who really did step up and those who demonstrated their inadequacy. I think we'll probably end up in a year's time with a much stronger cabinet than we have today.
Well, absolutely. And of course, we've seen a significant drop in the visibility of certain special advisors like Dominic Cummings during this entire period. So it'd be interesting to see how that pans out.
It's certainly readjusted the role of those behind the scenes with those who should be taking the decisions, having received advice. Obviously, there's been a complete transformation in the profile of experts, if I might use that term, who'd previously been denigrated. Scientists, medics, people with behavioral science understanding. My only criticism was, were we getting wide enough advice? Were we narrowing it too much to a couple of key centres in London? But that's because I've always been adverse to everything being London-centric. I think there's great expertise, wisdom, experience out in the sticks, and we should use it.
Rightly so. Now, was pandemic planning part of your time as a minister, particularly perhaps when you were Home Secretary?
Well, it was, but it was on the back of risk arising out of counter-terrorism measures.
Right.
I was the Home Secretary for 3 months when the attack took place in September 2001 on the World Trade Center and beyond. We did an enormous amount of scenario planning, both desktop and real. On the back of that, it was very heavily orientated to future developing terrorism risk. I certainly got involved with talking about pandemics. I remember being at a seminar in Edinburgh where the university there had done a lot of work itself on the issue of pandemics. And of course, we saw SARS and other things emerging. I think people have criticised the government for not picking up the report from 2015, 5 years ago. I think that what happens is human nature kicks in. You deal with what you're immediately faced with. You can sponsor reports. And this is true of business planning, of course, as well, and scenario planning for what business continuity will look like, recovery plans for business, what will happen if there's a cyber attack, what happens if there's an energy shutdown. These kind of things you can look at, but you're immediately turning your eyes to what's in front of you. And had we picked up a bit more on the danger from Ebola and SARS and what have you in the past, then we might have said, what if something hits us in the developed nations that we don't have a vaccine for, that we can't immediately whisk up protective materials or equipment, or for that matter, medicines that help with recovery, all of which we now see are a danger. I think this will make an enormous difference to the planning for the years ahead. I hope it will be widened so that we don't just look at what's happened, because very rarely do you see something exactly repeat itself. Some of the circumstances will be, but others won't. So that's why I've put emphasis in what I talk about on looking at the other virus, the cyber attack scenario, which could be just as dangerous in a world of just-in-time provision. One of the miracles of the modern developed world, except for the very poor, has been the distribution of food. A lot of it on computerized, technologically advanced systems. If that were to come down, we'd be in real trouble. So I think we need to think those sort of scenarios as well.
So have a full plan across both sectors, biological warfare, pandemics, and cyber warfare.
Yes, and to do so on different levels. I think, again, thinking global but acting local, we need a lot more to think about what would happen if something took shape that actually broke down those national and global chains and how we would cope. And without, obviously, we've got enough fear and anxiety to last a lifetime. Without creating even more anxiety, we can think about those things for the future in a more rational way, I think.
Now, aside from the physical threat of the virus, one of the things that people are vastly worried about is the effect on the economy, not just national economy, but also the world economy. Now, it has been said by certain parties, and I'd like to garner your thoughts on this. Is there a danger of the effects of the lockdown being even worse than those of the virus?
Were it be prolonged, I fear that balance would tip the other way. It is about proportionality. It is about balance. It's the wisdom of Solomon, really, to get the moment right when you start to move and then to move quickly. There's no doubt whatsoever that we are stocking up, not just on the economic and employment front, which will be devastating enough, but on the health and social well-being front, enormous challenges. And they will need careful handling because there's a lot of people whose lives, for a variety of reasons, are at risk in the future on a scale that we've been dealing with over the immediate handling of the pandemic, concentrating really hard on those affected by COVID-19, those sadly who have died or been seriously incapacitated. That will roll over into the economic, the social, the mental health and cultural well-being of the nation, and that will need all of us to pull together as well.
Absolutely. Now, do you believe the government's doing enough for business?
I think that the speed of reaction once the scale of the pandemic was clear was very good. I've praised Rishi Sunak for his action. Remember, a chancellor who had only just come into office was planning to deliver the budget in the middle of March and has had at least three equivalent budgets since. I think he's handled it very well, understandably worried now about what we're doing to our economy. The level of borrowing is sustainable because of low interest rates, but it reaches a point, of course, where it tips over so that you can't then do the kind of structural investment requirements that the government were laying out before and in the March budget. And those will have their consequences as well as a planned payback over many years. I think we've learned something over the last few months. We needed to take immediate action. We don't want another round of austerity equivalent from 2010 through to 2019. I don't think the nation, on the back of what's happened and the challenges we have, could take that. And therefore, we need a different plan, economic plan, over a much longer period, just as we did from the Second World War all the way through to 2002, when the final American loans were paid off.
Now, of course, one thing that's on everyone's lips, how much longer do you believe that the lockdown can go on for?
I believe that we need to be substantially back in action as an economy in June. This obviously is layered in terms of places where people would meet in large numbers, having to adjust to the fact that it will be longer for them. And sadly, that will involve business closures. It's why the Chancellor extended the furlough scheme to the end of June.
Mm-hmm.
But unless we get things moving in June, I think we'll run into the summer where all kinds of services and industries will have a chain reaction effect. And what happens with one will then have a major impact on another. And then you get the skittle effect where things get knocked down that you hadn't perceived were going to be affected. So I very much, if I were in government, and I always think of things in that context, what would I do if I were in government? I would be on the side from the second week in May, on the side of the hawks in terms of saying we've got to start moving, and we've got to do so with the collaboration and cooperation of the public who have got the message, who did behave, who responded magnificently. Let's try and get back, perhaps, doing things differently for a time, but substantially getting back to business as usual. And unless we do that, then those areas that can't and wouldn't expect to be back in action immediately get pushed further into the middle of the year and the autumn, and then they become unsustainable.
Now, of course, one of the other major developments we've had recently are the changes in the Labour Party. So if we could just speak on the Labour Party for a while. This might sound like an obvious question, but how does Sir Keir differ from Mr. Corbyn?
Well, I'm biased because I believe the Labour Party has come out of 4.5 years of a black hole of a nightmare, where it neither represented a credible opposition nor an electable government, and the combination was to let those who supported the Labour Party and needed some of its policies let them down very badly. Sir Keir Starmer both is a highly intelligent, professional lawyer who, as Director of Public Prosecutions, led the service well, had to take difficult decisions at a time of austerity, understands the world beyond Labour members, but has been able to do business with those who originally supported Jeremy Corbyn, and was able to command support from them. His creation of a balanced shadow ministerial team has been very encouraging. I supported Lisa Nandy, who he's made shadow foreign secretary, because I thought she understood the north of England and the disaffected former Labour voters. But I believe that Sir Keir has taken on board those who have something really sensible to offer, and I believe he will be both a great leader of the opposition. More importantly, he will then present himself as a credible alternative Prime Minister, and all governments need an alternative government at their shoulder. It was true of us from 97, and it took the Conservatives some time to recover and to get to that position, but they did, and the Labour Party will, and that's crucial for our democracy. All of us need to understand and appreciate that a living, breathing, functioning democracy requires a credible, confident, and in many ways supportable opposition, as well as a government that we clearly want to do well, because none of us want, as we didn't with the COVID crisis, none of us want the government to fail. We want to see our economy recover. We want our social well-being to be taken into account. We want to overcome deep-seated inequality and poverty, and we want to do it with enterprise and entrepreneurship and business playing their role, and that is about leadership nationally, locally, in the private and the public sector, people with ideas, with confidence, with the ability to pull teams around them, above all, to have some idea of what it is they want to achieve and a very good idea as to how to achieve it.
Now, of course, one of the biggest problems Secure is facing will be tackling the party's anti-Semitism problem. There has been a recent internal report that has been quite damning. What's your response to that report, and what does Secure need to do in response?
Well, there are two reports. One which is being produced by the Equality and Human Rights Commission, which he will, and has already indicated, will implement in full. The second was a leaked report put together by the supporters of Jeremy Corbyn, 800 pages of private interchanges on social media, which he has, Keir Starmer, set up an investigation to identify who did it, who leaked it, what the content was, does it have any salience and lessons for us, and where necessary, action will be taken. So I hope that as he moved very quickly to reassure the Jewish community, so he will be able to take the necessary steps to back up that reassurance with the kind of actions that says that this was a blight on a historic, great political party that all of us were ashamed of. We've been able to put that behind us and to move on to facing the future with confidence.
What's the one key thing that Secure needs to do to restore Labour as an election-winning party?
I think Sir Keir Starmer's major challenge is to convince sceptical voters that Labour has not only reverted to a party that they can support because they can see it acting, developing, presenting as a credible alternative government, but also that the lessons have been learned from the fiasco from 2015 onwards. In other words, there have to be very clear signals of substantial change, not just the right words, not just reassurance that we're not going back to some of the crazier policies, but actually that we've understood why the electorate rejected those policies so substantially in December 2019. If people get that message, they'll understand that the Labour Party has changed, as it did in the 1980s and early 90s, to become the electable government with the greatest majority in historic majority, even greater than 1945, which I was privileged to be able to take advantage of in 1997 when I joined the cabinet.
Now, I know what your answer is going to be to this question, but indulge me. Do you think Secure has what it takes to be PM?
Yes, I do. I think he has the background, he has the experience, he has the professionalism, he has the forensic mindset, and he has the confidence to have put a team around him which will ensure that it will work. And those elements are true of all leaders. Ideas, the ability to build a team, to have confidence in that team, and to be able to demonstrate leadership in practice, sometimes at the most difficult times. And, you know, the Leaders' Council, those sharing their thoughts with the kind of thing that we're doing now with a podcast, but also joining us in linking up in that network of people who can support and help each other and learn from each other. That is what needs to be done in politics as it needs to be done in business. Thank you very much indeed, Matthew.
Well, thank you for coming on the program. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I look forward to speaking with you again. Thank
you very much, and good luck to all those listening in what has been a nightmare scenario. Good luck for the future. Have courage, have confidence, and yes, listen to those who know more about business than I ever will.
Thank you, Lord Blunkett.
Thank you.
As always, it has been a pleasure both listening to and learning from our guests. I have been your host, Scott Challoner, and I hope that you all enjoyed listening. Until next time, I'll be back in the newly reopened Westminster Arms and raising a socially distanced glass to raising standards. Remember, although we are seeing things slowly returning to some form of normal, do continue to be sensible and look after yourselves and others, because it does make a huge difference in keeping people safe and saving lives. Goodbye.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. You can find every episode on iTunes, YouTube and Spotify. The views expressed by each guest in the podcast are their own. They do not represent the opinions of the Parliamentary Review, Westminster Publications, Lord Pickles, Lord Blunkett, David Curry or any other guest on the podcast. If you'd like to know more about the Parliamentary Review, please visit www.theparliamentaryreview.co.uk.